From the News Channel 5 network, this is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Barris coming to you live and direct from our studios downtown here on James Robertson Parkway on this Wednesday. And invite you to join in the conversation this morning. We're going to be coming to you not only live right now as you're watching us if you are at home on TV on the Plus, but we're also going to be streaming live on Facebook at newschannel5.com. So if you're watching and you have a question or comment about what we're talking about, I invite you to join us. Message me here. I'll be following it as we go. And good morning to all of you following us right now online, and try to get your questions answered. The first portion of the show, we're going to be talking, and I'll introduce her in a moment, but Beth Brown with the Tennessee Education Association to get her take on how things are shaping up as we approach what's going to be the beginning of the school year here in Tennessee. And then later in the program, someone I think you'll really want to talk to, and many of you may have questions and you're invited to drop in and message or call. Dr. Calvin Smith's going to be joining us from Meharry. He's been on the program before, does a terrific job, and he's really kind of been on the front lines, out at a lot of the testing stations for COVID-19, observing some of the new changes in terms of what we're learning about treatments and the like. He's got some of the very latest on that, including, if you heard, I mean, one of the things, and I'm not sure if they're using them here yet, is the determination that the swabs on those tests don't have to go up into your brain practically anymore, you know, where they send it way up into your nasal cavity. They're using shorter swabs now. Apparently they've learned that if you are infected, a shorter Q-tip length swab can do the job, and I think a lot less uncomfortable having that test done. We'll ask him about that. So that's what's on tap. I invite you to join us again. Your questions and comments on both online or call in. The number, we'll get that up in a moment. But let's introduce to you, as she's standing by now, Beth Brown. It's good to have you on with us. Beth, can you hear me loud and clear?
Good morning. Yes, I can hear you.
Good. With the Tennessee Education Association, I really appreciate you coming on. Have you had a swab yet? Have you had a COVID test yourself yet?
I have not, but I have been very much quarantined in my home by myself.
So no reason to. Yeah, I got you. I just was interested to see if anyone yet has had one of the new swabs, which are shorter. Some people don't like the idea of getting the test because they know it's uncomfortable. I've had it done. I didn't think it hurt, but the new shorter one, I think a lot of people are going to be glad to see that come along. But listen, I appreciate you coming on this morning. And if you would, just explain again, folks, what the Tennessee Education Association's role is with regard to schools, because we know, as we've seen all along, each individual district is pretty much coming up with their plan on when they're going to reopen, whether or not masks will be mandated. We just saw last night Rutherford County Schools voted to do that. So talk about the role that the Education Association plays.
Great. Thank you for the question. So the Tennessee Education Association is the largest professional organization in the state of Tennessee. We work every single day to advocate for the needs of our students and educators across the state. We have affiliates in every school district. And so our job as an organization is to help facilitate conversations and to give our members there across the state in different school districts the tools they need to have conversations to help guide decision making at the local level. Since we have been contemplating the reopening of school buildings and the start of a new school year, we've been having these conversations since April, and there are a couple of principles that have been guiding all of our work. First and foremost, student and educator safety, health, and well-being has to be the number one priority. And second, educators, those of us who work most closely with students, from classroom teachers to bus drivers to janitorial staff and food service personnel, counselors and nurses, we have to be involved in the creation and implementation of any plan regarding reopening if we have hope for those plans to be successful.
Makes sense. Okay, so all that being said, and I'm already seeing a lot of folks asking the same questions on Facebook as they're watching us this morning. Is it a good idea, with what is, there's no debate, a spike in COVID right now in the state of Tennessee and frankly nationwide, is it a good idea for schools to open up in the association's opinion?
So TEA, along with all of the medical personnel across the state, the CDC, the departments of health across the state and the nation, are watching the same thing. We're watching our active case numbers and the new case rates. And so it's imperative that as decisions are made about how and when to open school buildings and resume in-person instruction, we have to be using that data to drive decisions. And it's imperative that districts are flexible and are taking into consideration what the science is saying, so that we are making the best decisions regarding the safety of students and educators.
Okay, I know. Look, I love you, Beth, but I know you always have to walk the middle line, but that's not an answer. I mean, you already just told me a second ago that you've stayed quarantined yourself, which is one reason you haven't had to get tested. You've been indoors. So, I mean, I'm guessing if you've got a kid in school right now and this opening up, you're not sending your kid. Is that right or no? What would you do?
Well, I don't have any children. I will say that is a difficult decision for every family. We understand that there are a lot of factors that play into that decision, whether it's, the primary, of course, is the safety and health of your children. But we also know that parents' ability to continue working, as well as someone being there to provide supervision for students, is also a consideration. The bottom line is TEA believes that it is important for districts to guarantee that students and educators are safe if they plan to reopen school buildings.
And I think no one's going to disagree with that. I just find it very difficult to think that anyone can guarantee is a strong word. I think they can do the best they can and try, but I think we've already seen here in Davidson County an athlete that's already started playing early on. I think it was McGavock High School, infected, and hopefully he'll be okay. And he's been pulled aside to quarantine, so he's not with the rest of the teammates. But you just have to suspect as the school year begins, there are going to be cases propping up. And I don't know how anyone can guarantee if a case props up that everyone's going to be safe.
I don't disagree with that statement, Nick. I think that as districts are contemplating how and when to reopen buildings, and that's a big if, because you have to think about active cases and new cases and what the science and the data is telling us about the containment of the virus. If the virus is not contained, then it's not safe to reopen school buildings. But if school buildings and when school buildings are deemed safe to be reopened, it's imperative that districts are mitigating risk as much as they can, including requiring masks to be worn, ensuring that adequate disinfectant supplies are available, and that there are staff available to use those disinfectant supplies to keep the schools as clean as possible. I will say a continuing concern of TEA and educators across the state, as I'm having conversations with them, is the ability to social distance. Schools were built to bring students and people together for social inclusion. And so the realistic possibility of social distancing in schools is quite problematic. I know teachers are trying to be very creative right now, and I've spoken with many who are spending money out of their own pockets, trying to get plexiglass and create barriers within their classrooms so that students are as safe as possible. So those are all ongoing concerns and certainly things that we're monitoring as we monitor the data of the COVID cases in the state of Tennessee and where we're seeing spikes across the state.
And I know your concern is not just about students. As you said, it's the whole involved in education. And if there's some good news here with regard to younger people, we know that in general it appears that younger people are able to deal with this and maybe recover with fewer of the serious symptoms than adults, though there is now studies out showing clearly that young people who are infected, either asymptomatically or otherwise, can just as easily pass it on to others. And so I'm wondering, while maybe some of these young people, gosh forbid, if they do get infected, hopefully can recover and be well, do you worry about the teachers and the cafeteria workers and the sanitation control folks there that may be in the same boat with the kids and maybe not giving it to the kids, but maybe the kids giving it to them? Or taking it home with them, or taking it home with them to their families?
Absolutely. The portability of this virus and the fact that there might be students who are asymptomatic but carriers of the virus is quite a concern. We know that there's a significant percentage of Tennessee educators who are within the age level for high risk. We know that there are a number of Tennessee educators who have other risk factors. And so we have grave concern about the safety of our educators as we are contemplating resuming in-person instruction. I have personally heard from countless educators from across the state who have expressed their concerns not only for their health and safety, but also for their families. I've spoken with an educator whose husband has cancer and is taking chemotherapy. I've talked with another educator whose son is medically fragile, and she is contemplating leaving the profession because she is so worried about her child. So this is a difficult situation for everybody, and it's creating a lot of angst among educators who want to be back in school, who want nothing more than to start the school in a traditional way and be with their students, but just genuinely do not feel safe and are having to make decisions about whether they're going to retire early, whether they're going to leave the profession, or whether they're going to put themselves and their families at risk.
That's tough. All right, listen, we're going to take a break, and we should say as we go to the break, many of these school districts are giving parents the option that it may be a case of you can send your child, or you may have the option of learning virtually. And again, I don't care who makes any decision about whether you open or not. No one's going to force me to do anything with my kid that I don't want to do. And if I don't think it's safe, I'm not sending them. And if I think it is safe, I will send them. That's my choice. Whether the president says it, whether a school district says it, the parent makes the call. Listen, we'll take a break. I will be back with more of your questions and comments for Beth Brown with the Tennessee Education Association. And stick with us after this next segment, Dr. Calvin Smith, for the very latest on some of the testing and others with regard to COVID. You can ask him. He's on the front lines of it. We'll be back with more right after this.